Good evening all. I hope you're all well, keeping safe if you're working or not. I'm writing this as a concerned London taxi driver. 99% of you ain't going to know me, but my name's John. I've held my badge for just under 3 years now, and I'm still very much considered a butter boy. But I love the job, and I'm very proud to have passed the knowledge, as was the rest of my friends and family. We've been in lockdown now for roughly about 11 weeks, and I'm pretty certain that all of us have been out of work since then. I turned my light off on the 16th of March when I pretty much watched London shut down. I haven't been back in since. As we can all agree, these are worrying and unprecedented times. Not being able to earn money, pay our bills, feed our family, or pay our cab rent or finances, should you be lucky to still have one. This country has not been hit with anything like this since World War II, and even then, during the Great War effort, the Hackney carriage drivers played a huge part, and our brilliant service dates back well over 350 years when it became an Act of Parliament, and I hope it continues and we continue to provide the service for many more years to come, although I do feel this is in jeopardy. Now, I've never been one for doom and gloom, and I like to remain positive when it comes to the taxi trade, but the news regarding taxis that are not zero emission capable being excluded from certain bridges, roads and of course Beach Street Tunnel is deeply concerning. I for one have purchased my own taxi, a Mercedes Vito 2017 Euro 6 compliant, and in my opinion I bought just at the right time over a year ago when TfL were consulting regarding the London taxi age limit being reduced from 15 years down to 12 for all taxis that were not zero emission capable, not Euro 6 compliant, or unless they could run an LPG. Also, part of this proposal was the consideration for Euro 5 emission taxis to be upgraded to Euro 6 standards, but I haven't heard anything about this since. Reading through the taxi age limit consultation, it's clear that the Mayor of London and Transport for London would like a zero carbon city by 2050, which I feel would be fine in 30 years when the technology and the infrastructure is there to support this. But we are a long way from this and the technology yet. I often drive around town and I see charging points, Southwark Street, Russell Square, etc. Always a queue of taxis to charge up. So it's evident that the 3,000 or so zero emission taxis, they're unable to rely on pure electric power, and the vast majority, by their own emissions, will operate on petrol, as they can't charge their taxi while they're having their rest break. This does not include the other issues, where vehicles that are not taxis using taxi-only charging points when they're not allowed to do so. But also, there's no enforcement regarding this, so we're powerless to do anything. I've provided a link for the consultation, the transcript of this, if you want to have a read of it. So, one of the biggest issues I feel the trade is facing is the vehicles that we can purchase. Since late 2017, no new taxis can be registered unless they are zero emission capable and meet all the requirements for wheelchair access, 25-foot turning circle, 5 passengers or more, etc, etc. Now, there's only 2 models that are now available to buy to us that meet this criteria. The Nissan Dynamo or the LEVC TXE, which will set you back roughly between £50,000 and £70,000. But the worrying thing about this, technology is untested and they haven't been on the road long enough for us to see the long-term problems, the battery life performance or any other issues, so taxi drivers are dubious to invest, rightly so in my opinion. Now, I test drove the LEVC taxi for 48 hours and I will agree it looks lovely, but for me, the technology is not there yet. When I fully charged the taxi, I was told to get close to 60 to 70 miles. Had been claimed previously by LEVC themselves. But in reality, it's 30 to 40 miles with the heaters, aircon or any other electrics working in the taxi, which is unavoidable, as you all know, so you're forced to drive on petrol, which the vast majority of the time the drivers will do. Also, the drivers who live in the home counties, these taxis are unable to operate on pure electric power alone, so it's pointless in claiming it's a zero emission taxi. As we all know, it's essentially a hybrid, and indeed polluting when they're hiding behind a zero emission status. While we're on the conversation of the TXE zero emission capability, let's not forget it's got a 1.5 litre Volvo T3 engine, which the CO2 emissions are 128 grams per kilometre, and my diesel Euro 6 taxi is only slightly higher at 161 grams per kilometre. So it's only slightly worse for the environment, but They didn't have to mine all the precious metals for the batteries in my taxi, unlike the TXC, so they're already more damaging and polluting to the environment before they've even rolled off the production line. So after doing lots of research, I concluded that a Euro 6 compliant taxi was the best option, as it met all the criteria for Transport for London and the Mayor of London proposed changes, and also would meet my personal needs for my family. I could get rid of my heavy polluting Euro 3 diesel taxi, which I was renting at the time, but also my family car. I thought I was doing my part to help clear up London's air, but fast forward just over a year later, and we're being told that Euro 6 compliant taxis that are not, which a lot of us purchase to operate fully inside the ultra low emission zone, are now being restricted from bridges, streets, tunnels, when we were assured they would meet the 15-year criteria and we were able to operate in the ultra low emission zone. Now, I'm deeply concerned, and I'm sure there's a lot of you. I still owe a lot of money on my taxi, and in 4 years' time, when it's been paid off, what other restrictions will be placed in that time? What other restrictions will be placed on drivers? Will we be compliant? Will we have full access? If I'm unable to work in the city I'm fully licensed to operate in due to the goalpost being moved, who's going to compensate us? Now, moving on to my next point about the restrictions is Waterloo Bridge and London Bridge, being for cycles, buses, zero emission taxis only. So, I ask, I'm driving westbound down Fleet Street, I get flagged down by a wheelchair user, person assisted by a guide dog, or indeed a blue badge holder. Because let's not forget, not all disabilities are visible. And they ask me for Waterloo Station. I'm unable to go over Waterloo Bridge. I can't turn around and use Blackfriars Bridge because of the new restrictions. Or I can't go over London Bridge. So I have to take them all the way down the Strand. I have to take them all the way down Whitehall, over Westminster Bridge, and then into Waterloo, doubling the length of the time of the journey and increasing the price. So they are being discriminated against under the Equality Act by having to charge a person more or refuse to take them, which we all know is against our licensing conditions, potentially losing my badge or any driver for that matter, whether it be taxi or private hire. So, where do I stand if such a case arises? Well, I will point out under the Equality Act, organisations have a responsibility to make sure that disabled people can access jobs as easily as non-disabled people. This is known as the duty to make reasonable adjustments. I further point out that indirection discrimination occurs when an organisation has a particular policy or way of working that has a worse impact on a disabled person compared to people that are not disabled. Indirect discrimination is unlawful unless the organisation is able to show that there is a good reason for the policy and it is proportionate. By allowing one type of taxi and not the other, that is not proportionate. I can't see any plausible answer to this question, and I find it embarrassing really, the thought of having to refuse a person with disabilities or any job in general to explain to the passenger, I can't use certain roads or bridges, so you'll have to flag down an electric taxi. The punter does not know the difference between certain types of taxis. They just look for the orange light, so any passenger, I will have to take the long way round, I will have to charge them more, which will lead to complaints, disputes about fares. I did the knowledge and I learnt London like the back of my hand. To learn the most direct routes, I have a fully compliant vehicle, which is wheelchair accessible, and I was told would have a 15-year life, which is now not the case. And now a year later, we're being excluded from certain roads. This is unacceptable, and I believe there is a clause here that can be challenged legally. My next point brings me on to the type of vehicles that can use these streets, bridges, etc. Cycles, buses, or zero-emission taxis? Well, what about zero-emission buses? There's no mention that the buses will be zero-emission capable, so I decided to do some research on the number of buses operating in the capital. I've attached the following link to the transcript if you want to have a read to it, which confirms the number of buses operating in the capital as of 31st of March 2019. Now, there's no figures on the Transport for London website to turn around what the figures are for 2020, so these might have changed, so if it's slightly wrong, I do apologise, I'm going on the figures that are at hand at the moment. Anyway, total number of buses operating in the capital, 9,142. Of them, total diesel buses, 5,308. Total hybrid buses, 3,669. Total electric buses, 155. And total fuel cell buses, 150. So, over 50% of the buses in the capital are diesel powered, which is still a great concern. If we're really that concerned about air quality, it needs to be lower. So if only half the fleet are zero emission capable, but I was curious about the hybrid buses and what engine they use. Having a look at the hybrid bus, this is the new Route Master, which I think we all know. So I decided to do some digging on what the engine specification were for these buses. Looked on the Gov website to check the emission standard and doesn't confirm what the Euro rating or the engine emissions are. So I've done a check. One of the London buses, registration Lima Tango 02111, which is confirmed as a Whiteman bus, first registered in 2017. It has a 4.5 litre diesel engine, but somehow the Euro status is confirmed as zero. Sorry, the CO2 emission status are shown as zero. Surely this is impossible, as it has such a large engine. Further research into the new Route Master bus brings up the following link on Wikipedia, which I've included in the transcript. Now, this is where things get interesting. I was expecting them to be Euro 6 compliant, but nope. These are confirmed as Euro 5 rating, so they're more polluting than anyone who owns a Euro 5 or a Euro 6 taxi, or indeed any other vehicle with the same rating due to the buses having the higher engine capacity. So, if we take the total number of buses that have a true zero emission capability, not hiding behind the hybrid theory, this has gone down from 50% to 4% going on Transport for London's figures. We all know the main buses we see operating in the capital are the new Route Masters. These buses have now been confirmed as Euro 5 and not Euro 6 compliant. But will these still have access to the streets, bridges, Bank Junction, Beach Street? I know I see them going over there all the time and through Bank Junction, etc. How's this a level playing field? London taxis are the only fully wheelchair accessible vehicles in London that can be publicly hired, perform a door-to-door service, pick up, drop off anywhere, and in times like this where people will be returning to work and discouraged from public transport, surely a purpose-built vehicle with security partition and social distancing as a standard is the best vehicle for the job. And we are an army of 20,000 plus drivers. We are key to keeping London moving and passengers safe. But not just in central London, let's not forget we've got the suburbs as well. This was completely overlooked by the Mayor during question time when the Greater London Authority asked if taxis would be allowed access to these streets, and his reply was, "We will allow zero emission capable taxis to have access to those streets where pedestrians, cycles and buses have access, and not to allow heavy polluting taxis on these streets." Well, going on Transport for London's figures, I've just proved my Euro 6 compliant taxi is more compliant than 95% of the buses in London. I've also been keeping a close eye on the Street Space London plan that's been implemented, and it's flawed in every way that you look at it. With bridges being closed, Park Lane being reduced by one lane in both directions, new implementations on Oxford Street. If you haven't read it, that's another read. I dread to think what other change will be implemented, but the traffic will become worse and pollution will go through the roof. Taxis only contribute a small part of London's pollution, and since 2017, when we saw the first zero emission capable taxi on the road, we are doing our part to reduce the emissions, but it appears buses are able to operate as they please. Not just in central London, but also in the suburbs as well. What difference will the new changes make to the air quality over London Bridge or Waterloo Bridge? None. Absolutely zero. When you think about it, go over these bridges, there's very little people, there's no schools, no communal areas in the surrounding streets, but at either end of the bridges, this problem will be made far worse, and then where do we go from there? If you want a zero carbon city by 2050, then there is no need to penalise the cab driver. By taking their vehicles off the road and implementing these restrictions, this will be achieved naturally through natural races or vehicles reaching the end of their licence age. I personally think as London taxi drivers we have a very strong case to challenge this, and now more so than ever it's imperative where buses go, taxis go. Sorry for the long-winded, I've included the transcripts if you want to have a read or check any of the links out, but I felt that I had to put my bits worth in. So be lucky all, stay safe, and hopefully we'll all be back at it soon.